Welcome to today's webinar, and our webinar is entitled Making the Case for Information Management, What You Need to Know to Prove Value, Remove Risks, and Save Money. I'm Teresa Resick, Vice President of Education here at AIM, and AIM is your host and producer of today's event. And AvePoint is our underwriter, and we thank them very much for their support. And certainly thank you for taking the time to join us today. And these two always make our webinars and make learning fun. And I'm so pleased to have these folks from AvePoint with us. Alyssa Blackburn, who's the Director of Information Management, and Bruce Berends, who's the Senior Solutions Engineer and of Product Strategy. So let me turn things over to Alyssa, and thank you.
Again, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a really cool topic that I am really looking forward to getting into with everybody today. For those of you who haven't met us, my name's Alyssa Blackburn. I'm AvePoint's Director of Information Management Strategy, and I recently accidentally hugged my child's teacher. And now I'm going to have to leave the country because I'm so embarrassed that my children are going to have to change schools, all kinds of things. So and I'll tell you a little bit more about that story as we go. I am joined, as always, by my incredible colleague, Bruce Berends. Bruce, how did you break your friend's butt?
So this story may not be as exciting as people were hoping, but I do martial arts, and I currently do karate. One of my long-term, I suppose, sparring partners decided that they didn't want to block a kick as well as they should, so they now have a broken coccyx. So yes,
I think broken butt sounds so much more better than
yeah,
but yours is technically accurate, so we can go with that. But basically to say, we've all done embarrassing things. So we work for AvePoint. AvePoint is an independent software vendor. One of the incredible pieces of software that we make is our information management and our information lifecycle solution. We're not talking so much about that. We're not talking so much about that today. We're really going to talk more about a business case and more the process of information management. Absolutely do keep those questions coming. I think you can use it the Q&A. As Teresa said, we'll get that. Hopefully we'll get the chat working as well. We are also going to make this interactive. So we're going to use a little tool called Slido. You can either just go to slido.com and punch in this number, or you can scan that QR code. You can scan that QR code on the screen there with your smartphone, and you'll be able to answer questions, and we'll be able to see everybody's responses live as they come through. They're all anonymous. We're not that doesn't collect any of your information, only the answers that you put in. So as long as you don't put your name or phone number or credit card details in there, please don't do that. It's all completely anonymous. So we'll have a bit of fun with Slido today, and we'll get some great feedback from everybody on that one. So let's launch straight into it.
People already started.
People have already started. Go people. That's right. So how much data, this is just a bit of a straw poll here. How much data do you think is created every day? 2.25 trillion megabytes, 1.14, they keep moving. 1.14 trillion megabytes. I lost count after the 10th zero. That was me, definitely. 11 billion megabytes, or 225 billion megabytes. We've got some good responses here, definitely. I think that we are I think that what we're saying here, regardless of what the actual number is, what we're saying is, good grief, there is a lot of information and data created on a daily basis. So we're really talking about huge numbers here. And when we're talking about these huge numbers, we have to really be talking about different strategies for being able to manage it. And again, when we've got this much content, look, honestly, whether it's 2.25 trillion or 1.14 trillion or 225 billion, actually, it doesn't even matter anymore. What we're talking about is just a monumental figure here that needs to be managed. And so we're talking about an incredibly important asset that we need to make, that we really need to make a solid business case for in selling the value of the management of this information. So we'll close this one down now. Thank you to all of you who have entered in there. We're going to have some more as we go through. So definitely stay engaged. Definitely stay engaged with that for sure. But let's look at some more solid figures about what we're creating here.
So as Alyssa kind of alluded to, content's growing at an exponential rate, especially in cloud solutions. So the more information that is in these repositories is the more information that we need to manage. So from a Microsoft standpoint, over 300 million monthly active users are using Teams at the moment. So, and that was as of April 2023, which is an increase from I think it was 270 million the year before. This one's a real interesting statistic, which is around 47% of workers can't find the information that they need to do their job in an easy, efficient way, which obviously leads to cost increases and things like that, which we'll talk about later. The next one is quite an interesting statistics. On average, globally, every human creates about 1.7 megabytes of data every second. So it is a lot of data that we're creating at the moment. And finally, we have an estimation of around 200 zettabytes of data that is expected to be stored in cloud infrastructure by 2025. So I don't know if that's been revised due to COVID recently, and obviously everyone moving to remote systems. Yeah, quite a lot of information, quite a lot of data being hosted in those cloud solutions.
Okay. So we really are talking about a huge amount of content here. So let's go back to Slido. Let's go back to you. I also think I just saw in the chat, we've got another Aussie on the call. Oh my goodness. We've got another 4 a.m.er on the call. Woo! But wherever you are from, definitely welcome. So let's talk about the risks. We've got just this monumental amount of data. What's the biggest risk that's associated with that? That could be things like you could consider security, which is one that we've got here. What you'll see on Slido as well is that the more people who type the same thing, the words will get bigger. So we'll kind of get a lovely word picture of what this looks like. Dollars, yeah, totally agree on the dollars one, definitely. Hackers, my goodness, that is such a good one. I definitely, and I think that we saw yesterday, Bruce, I think you showed me yesterday, there's been another really significant data breach. Who was that with?
I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but there was mention that Sony was one of the ones.
Yeah. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that in the next couple of days. Definitely difficult to find. And I think I absolutely losing important content over the long term. Don't know where all that information is, efficiency, things like that. These absolutely, I couldn't agree more with every one of these. I think that these are really significant risks. And I think what comes with the one I'm interested in this one is don't know where all the information is, too hard to find, things like that. What we're really at risk of, what we're really at risk of here is poor decision making and the inability to make decent decisions because we don't have access to the information that we need. So when we make information too hard to find, or there's too much of it, it's just impossible to make good decisions. So just recently, actually last week, I had a week of time off, which was lovely, and I took my children to Sydney for a week, and we went to the Blue Mountains, which, you know, if you're in the area, I know some of you might be a bit far away, but if you ever happen to be in the area, highly recommend. But we ended up down in a rainforest, which was 270 meters from, so we were down 270 meters, which, what did we say that was in yards?
I don't know how many blue whales that is.
And it was something, it's 14 blue whales or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's filled with trees, absolutely packed with trees. And if you had said to me, Alyssa, go and find this particular tree in this just absolutely enormous rainforest, what are my chances of actually being able to find that tree? They're non-existent, absolutely non-existent, because the sheer volume around me was just way, way too much. And this is exactly the same thing that our users are struggling with, because we've got this enormous volume of content that they just can't find anything to be able to make those good decisions. Got some absolutely fantastic answers on here. Thanks so much for your contribution. And I think what you'll see as we go through this as well is that, you know, you're not alone in this. You know, people are feeling the same things, and you know, having these same challenges.
I think we need to call out mental health as a good response to
what's the biggest
risk associated with all this content, because I agree wholeheartedly with that one.
Absolutely. Did you know actually there was a news article? I'll see if I can dig up the link for it while we're on here. But there was a news article recently about the mental health issues that information hoarding and data hoarding has, and they're actually starting to do some studies on it now about relating it to actual physical hoarding and the mental health issues that are associated with that, and how that can be really quite overwhelming for people. So I think that's a really significant thing. So, all right, let's keep going though. But great answers on there, everybody. Thank you so much for that. Essentially, what we're looking at here is, if we are not managing our active content, so the content that everybody's using every day, this is essentially what our workplace is looking like, and that's just absolutely something that we don't want. So what some of the options that we've had, and this is particularly something that a lot of organizations are struggling with at the moment, is, okay, well, we'll get things out of the active repository and we'll put it into an archive, or we'll put it into cheaper storage, or we'll just move it over there. But essentially, this is the problem that we're creating. So regardless of where we are storing our content, this huge volume of content, the key is lifecycle management. It doesn't matter where that content is. Is it in an inactive repository? Is it an active repository? Things like that. It still needs to be managed. And what we're essentially saying is, if we translate that to the physical world, we're essentially saying we've hoarded our house, so now we're going to go and buy a storage container down the road that's a little bit cheaper, but we're going to fill that up, and then we're going to do another one, and then we're going to do another one. We're not actually solving the problem. The key to solving the problem is lifecycle management. Now, I know that you all agree with that. John in the chat, thank you so much. Information should flow like a river, not stored up like in a dam. Yes, I love that analogy. That's absolutely, totally agree with that. We're not going to talk so much about lifecycle management, because I think, I don't think anybody disagrees, although, feel free to argue with me. I think, that'd be interesting. But what I want to do is transition to talking about how we make the case for the importance of lifecycle management in our organization. And if you have heard me talk before, which some of you may have. You know I love a story. You know I love a good story. And don't worry, we are going to finish on a story today, I promise. But I think that stories are one of the best ways that we can communicate value. So what I want to do today is, when we're talking about making this business case, we're talking about communicating value, I'm going to share a few stories with you about how we can do this, and using some real life examples of where things didn't go very well. So that's how we're going to work through this, and then we can talk a little bit at the end about how we transition this into a business case. So we've got all of these problems. We've got all of these issues, and we saw a lot of these in the Slido before, that it's really translating to, potentially we could be looking at fines for, for lack of compliance. And fines, I would say, we've got to stop thinking about it in terms of fines for, I just didn't meet this particular piece of very specific information management legislation. But fines could come in all kinds of different ways. Fines could come as a result of, poor decision making, for example. And it could come under really any kind of legal environment, because we didn't have access to the right information. So if we stop thinking about, if you, breach this one particular, if you have a breach in this one particular space, you can have a breach in any kind of particular space. What it actually comes down to is the fundamental issue of, it was an information management failure. We'll also talk about loss of productivity, and that's really closely aligned with user frustration. And I'll give you some good stuff with that as well. All of this, of course, can lead to reputational damage and poor decision making. And actually, I think that poor decision making is probably the biggest risk that we've got here, because we're so reliant on the information that we have to be able to make good decisions. What happens when we can't access the information? And then finally, we'll talk about cost. So one of, I think, the really interesting things about our transition to more cloud-based storage and cloud systems is that kind of had this idea that this is all endless, and it was forever, and we could just as are the clouds, this storage was endless. But it turns out that wasn't quite the case at all. There is an end. Well, there's not necessarily an end to storage, but there's really an enormous cost to that. And we know that a number of organizations are really feeling the pressure of the cost of storing this information, particularly in a cloud world. So we'll have a look at some examples of what that looks like, but also how we as information managers can actually return really substantial cost savings to an organization just through lifecycle management. So what are we looking for? What are we looking for here? Really, when we're making the case for information management, we really want to look for 3 success outcomes. So, and if we can narrow it down, these, of course, there's lots of different things that come out of all of these. But if we have 3, if we can narrow it down to 3 things and bundle these together, I would say that we're talking about integrity, efficiency, and cost savings. So integrity, I would bundle things like risk and compliance and reputational damage and ability to make good decisions and things like that. And I would say that that's both for the integrity of our organization, but also for the integrity of our information. So that's integrity. Efficiency is about how can we make it easier for users to do their jobs, and cost is literally let's see how we can save some money on this. So they're the 3 focus areas that we're going to look at. We're going to look at today. I found this quote from E.O. Wilson, who's actually a famed biologist, which I definitely knew before I went searching for these quotes.
Bruce and I, expert on ants. Yes.
On ants, that's exactly right. Bruce and I had a big argument when I put this slide in, because he said I didn't know who this guy was, and I said I absolutely did know who this guy was, and then we both spent several hours Googling this guy, and we know more about ants than we possibly should. But anyway, I think that the quote stands though, and that is that we're drowning information while starving for wisdom. the world henceforth will be run by synthesizers, people who are able to put together the right information at the right time, think critically about it, and make important choices wisely. We are the synthesizers, and I think that's a really lovely way of describing our role in this, as the synthesizers of all of this drowning of information, to allow people to be able to access the right information at the right time, think critically about it, and make important choices wisely. And I think that's a really powerful message there, definitely. Okay, so let's go back into Slido. Hopefully, if you have, you can scan that QR code at any time. But what does information integrity actually mean to you? When you look at something like information integrity, what do you think? Trustworthy? I think yes, absolutely. Accuracy, I like that one for sure. Reliable, yeah. Authenticity, authentic and reliable. Truth, chain of custody, yes, that's a really good one as well, because we can't forget that information integrity comes from process, and not to say that we should have process for the sake of process, but this is where this comes from, is the ability to have really solid process, of which definitely chain of custody is one. Informed decision making, metadata, version control, yes, absolutely, totally agree with all of this. I think we're definitely getting a vibe here on authentic, accurate, trustworthy, identifying evidence to support your decision. Distillation. I like that one. I think that's really good. I think that's absolutely correct. Completeness. Yeah, lots of really good things here, definitely. So I think that information integrity is one of those things that I bang on about all the time, because I think it's so critical to what we do, and making the business case, including that as part of a business case, I should say, is one of those really important things. Definitely useful. Oh, I just saw useful pop up. I think that's a sensational answer there as well. It has to be useful. It has to be usable. I think that has to be available. Really, really great responses here. I think that these are all absolutely accurate. All right, we'll move on to that. Thank you again for your responses in that. So let's have a look at some actual stories, and let's have a look at some actual examples. And sometimes what we need in our organizations is to maybe even go back within our organization and be able to look at maybe where some of these say suboptimal things have happened. But one of the examples that I want to give, and these are everything that I'm giving you is from publicly available sources, but I want to give the example of PG&E, and just this is one of the many fines that they received from the San Bruno blast that happened, I think, in about 2008. One of the amongst many issues of this, and this is a really significant thing that happened here, but essentially a gas pipeline under the town of San Bruno failed and caused a massive explosion, which killed 8 people, destroyed 38 homes. It was really significant, and the consequences are extremely tragic. When we go back to look at some of the causation for this, though, some of the evidence shows that PG&E had lost the maintenance records for this particular pipeline. So it hadn't been maintained in many, many, many years because they didn't have access to the information that they needed to be able to make good decisions. And unfortunately, the result of that was this really enormously tragic event, because they didn't maintain the pipeline, because didn't really know that it was there. Now there was a whole bunch of other stuff. This is I'm picking out one small component of this that I think illustrates this point really well. But they were fined quite significantly. They weren't fined necessarily under any kind of records management legislation or things like that. What they actually got fined over was safety records and essentially their lack of records. So it's more than just about meeting particular regulations, although that's really important because the regulations are there for a reason. We need to be looking at this about risk reduction, and non-compliance can result not only in serious reputational damage, but also tragic loss of life. So 8 people are no longer here today because the records were not there to be able to make that decision. This is one example, and I can see as well that there's that this is being used in an exam sample question, and also Heather, I see you was using this example as well when teaching about records management. It's such a good example, most definitely. I think that, oh gosh, I've just completely lost my train of thought. But this is one that shows that it doesn't matter that it hasn't come under a particular, it doesn't matter that it hasn't come under a particular information management or records management piece of legislation, that you can go back through your organization. You can look for other examples and things like that to be able to say, this is the value of information management. We need to do this for risk reduction and things like that. I can see another question in the Q&A, which is, are there any more recent examples? So another example, there are examples everywhere for this. And another example I'll give you of that is, this is an Australian example. It's just the one that's sort of popped into my head at the minute. In Australia, there was a program recently about collecting social security debt. So where it was believed that people who were on social security owed a debt to the government about collecting those. The system that they implemented, though, it came to be known as robo-debt, but the system they implemented wasn't able to read any kind of unstructured data. So if somebody had submitted, for example, an employment separation certificate to say that I am no longer employed and that's why I'm applying for social security, the system wasn't able to read that. So it would raise a debt, and these debts turned out to be very, very significant. It would raise a debt against this person to say, well, you haven't given us the right information. That led to huge amount of turmoil for people who are already incredibly vulnerable, and very, very tragically led to a number of suicides for very, very vulnerable people in Australia who had an incorrect debt raised against them because the system wasn't processing this unstructured data. Now, again, because that system didn't have access to the right information, we can see a flow-on effect of all of these different things that result in an unimaginable tragedy for the people who are affected by this. We don't want to be in that position when we have the information to be able to make better decisions. So if you've got some examples or some that you're happy to share, I can see one that had just been shared now, which as another one I think is a really good example of that. Please share them in the chat as well, because I think everybody benefits from understanding these stories as well. So I've got some articles coming out that if you follow me on LinkedIn, please get in touch with LinkedIn. I love being connected with people there. I've got some more stories coming out in some articles that I've contributed to and am writing over the coming weeks. So this is a big one as well. You will get these slides at the end as well, just to be clear. So I'm not going to go through this. I'm conscious of time and how much more information I want to share with you. And so, but there's some other examples here about holding on to information for the wrong periods of time, and some of the fines that organizations are receiving for these information management failures. Bruce, do you want to talk about, I've given you about 35 seconds to talk about
That's okay.
efficiency and productivity.
That's all good. That's fine. So I suppose the key thing with efficiency and productivity is, are we making it easy for users to do their jobs, and making it easy for them to do the right thing ultimately is what it comes down to. So in a lot of scenarios, especially in the modern workplace where we've got lots of cloud solutions that people are using, there are ways that we can automate that as much as we like. But I'm interested to understand how long you spend looking for something before you give up on it. And this kind of goes back to that original 47% of people can't find the information that they need to do their job.
Oh, I love that. That's the first one, because I personally am 100% in the less than a minute camp. If I cannot find it really quickly, like, using search or where I think it would have been stored or things like that, my limit's usually about 45 seconds, definitely, before I'll be like, no, so clearly it's lost. But what that means for me is, if I can't find it in less than that 1 minute, being the wildly impatient person that I am, I usually just go and recreate something, which is then, of course, a complete waste of my time, because perhaps if I up my limit to 30 minutes, maybe I would have had more of a chance of finding it.
Well,
but on the other side of
you
that,
do usually ask me if you can't find it too.
Yeah, I do, 100%. So that's at about the 45-second mark, where I then transition the task to you, so and make you find things for me. So I think I've got some of my colleagues who are now joining us today, who are like making mental notes. If Alyssa asks you to find something, block her on Teams.
You know what? I am somewhat heartened. Somewhat heartened that no one has gone with the "I don't bother starting because it's usually hopeless."
Yeah,
so
I know.
That's a good thing. That is definitely a good thing.
Oh no, Maya just blocked me. I knew that was coming though, Maya. I love that we've been given an alternate option here. Is I will die in seeking its truth, which I love. I think that's fantastic. And you're absolutely right. We have a group of information management people here, definitely. So I do think that there's a we are more committed to the cause, definitely, on that one.
Cool. So how can we make things, or what is efficiency all about when it comes to end users? So just the statistic here that users can lose up to 10 hours a week looking for, or as Alyssa mentioned, recreating content that they cannot find. And that obviously, as we've discussed, leads to a risk of poor decisions being made because of the information that is in there, and because there is a lack of access to that good information. And quite simply, users don't want to be records managers or information managers, and a lot of solutions that are on the market these days are all about taking the burden away from end users, and ensuring that records management and information management is done in an automated way. So the next thing to look at is cost. So how much money can you save through good information management? And there's a couple of key things here, but the main one here is around storage costs and storage optimization. So we've got a Slido next, which is all about, if you're using cloud storage, how close are you to reaching your capacity limits at the moment of that cloud storage?
This can be, you can just put in, you don't need to put in a percentage or anything here. One of your answers could be no idea. There you go. So definitely one of your answers, if you're not aware, then say, like, that's not you know, that's not an issue at all. Eric, I noticed you're looking for a link to the McKinsey study. I can't put my hands on the link. I have it, yes, but it might be something that we could send as part of the follow-up. I might actually I might even include a link in the PowerPoint deck that we'll share. So I'll make sure that we can make sure that we can get that one for you.
No one has said anything yet. That's
okay. We just have to pay more. Yeah. So more importantly, I don't know when or how it can happen for upcoming in which repository. Yes, that's an excellent one, definitely. So I think that there's some really interesting stuff here. This is probably one of the things in all seriousness that organizations this is the thing that people want to talk to me about at the moment, which is help. We're so far over our storage capacity and this is where sort of IT starts to get involved and say, oh, it's okay, well, and then we'll just move everything to an archive kind of thing. But then we potentially lose control of it and things like that, which is a really serious issue. So let's have a look at actual potential cost savings.
Yeah. So hanging on to too much data can also be equally as expensive as not hanging on to enough data, such as the fines that we were talking about before. So just some of the figures that you can see on the screen here. The first one around the 350 to 525K, basically with this organization, 50 to 75% of reviewed emails were found to have no retention value, and the company paid that amount to review all the records that basically had no value that were in there. The 6.2 million around a major energy company, they said that it would take 6 months and a cost of 6.2 million to do a discovery process across their information to even identify sensitive information. The 2.1 million there around organizations, that's what they lose on average because of poor data management systems or poor data management practices in general across the environment. So if we jump to the next slide, where ultimately there are substantial cost benefits to implementing good information lifecycle. So we spoke about the 200 plus zettabytes before. That is estimated to be in infrastructure by 2025. The amount of bytes, and there's your answer to that initial question that we asked, the amount of bytes that are being used or created each day is excessive. And there are limits to cloud storage. So I noticed before that someone mentioned that cloud storage is cheap. It is cheap until you get to a point where you've hit limits and you need to start paying a lot more for it. And yes, it can be cheaper than on premises and things like that, but there is substantial costs around it. So the key, I suppose, outcome here is to implement good information lifecycle, robust retention and disposal processes to ensure that you're not keeping the content that you don't need to keep beyond its I suppose, need or value. And then also archiving the content to cheaper tiers of storage potentially as well that you're not actually using, and that's kind of cleaning up your environment for your end users as well, so that they're not getting a face full of content that's really not that valid to them or really not that important to them because it should be in an archive or out of their purview.
I see also some people making comments as well for, AI is going to solve all of our problems and things like that. And I certainly agree with the sentiment of the message there. We're actually going to run a second webinar. I think it's the end of October. Teresa will be able to give you the thing, but we're actually going to talk about how I can help solve some of these challenges, but also what it's not. So we need to we'll be doing a follow-up one on how AI fits into all of this. Okay, moving along, a couple of things to go. We're getting close to being able to wrap up, and I want to give you an opportunity to ask any other questions if you can. We've gone through some stories as well, you know, to talk about how we can show this value, but how do we translate this into an actual business case? So just ideas here about making sure that we align this to the strategy of the organization. How does this fit into this? And while we may not get a project up on its own, where can we slot in with something else? You know, is there other things going on in the organization that this could potentially align to? Looking at an options analysis, definitely, and consequences. What happens if you do nothing? So what can we do in that place? We have to be really clear in what happens when we, you know, that if we do this, this is going to be the outcome, but also if we don't do this, this is going to be the consequences. The cost is, we want to look at that from both sides as well. And that is, what is it going to cost us to do this, but also what is it going to save? So a lot of the organizations that I'm working with at the moment are saying to me, I don't have budget for this. This project is going to have to pay for itself. So for example, if we do move things to cheaper storage, that's great, but that has to fund it. And how do we do that in a way that we can still maintain the oversight of the information, even though it's been moved to an IT archive? And then the last one is about how we're going to implement this. So what's required to actually get it going? And even more importantly, how will we know it's been successful? So this is an area that I see a lot of organizations fall down in, is understanding their success criteria, and being able to then to measure, to say, yes, this has been successful, because we've got these measurable outcomes. We might skip this one because we're running up on time, because in a shocking turn of events, I have talked too much, and I did want to finish on a story today, but I wanted to tell you a story of 2 birthday cakes. So I have a deal with my children that for their birthdays, I will make them a cake of any flavor, any kind of shape, or, you know, character, or things like that. And I'm not too bad at it. I am absolutely nowhere professional, but I'm not too bad for an amateur. I'm an amateur baker, but sometimes things don't go according to plan. And I'm going to show you the story, or I'm going to show you a picture of one of the cakes that I made for my daughter, who asked for a cake in the shape of a mermaid tail. I'm going to ask you to pop in the chat, what do you think this looks like? Because I'm telling you right now, does not look like a mermaid tail. And so pop in a frog. That's much nicer than what I thought it was. A body with no arms. Yes, agree. Agree with that. Definitely a heart with legs. Oh, I like that. That's much nicer than what I said it was. But here's where I went wrong with this cake. So first of all, she wanted a red velvet cake, which was fine. And so a red velvet cake obviously is served with cream cheese icing, which is like the best part of the cake. But piping cream cheese icing is really difficult. You really want to use a buttercream for that. So I had the genius idea, an absolute genius idea of, I added some gelatin to the cream cheese icing to make it a little bit more solid. But clearly that did not work. Now, she still liked the cake. I love this picture because I can look back on it and remember how hilarious it is, or how hilarious it was. And I certainly don't think it ever looked like a mermaid tail. I think your comments in the chat are much kinder than what I said it looked like. But my next daughter, who was born 2 weeks after my first daughter, with a 4-year gap in between, if anyone's wondering there, because the big sister had a mermaid tail cake, the little sister also had to have a mermaid tail cake. And so this was my second attempt at the mermaid tail cake, where I took my learnings from the first Sorry, I just saw Andrea. I just saw your comment in the chat and love it. Nailed it. Perfect use of Australian slang there, definitely. But in my second attempt at the cake, I think we can all agree this looks much, much better than the first mermaid attempt, because I took what I learned from my first effort. I applied it to my second effort. So how can we relate this? How on earth do I relate learnings from cake back to information management? A couple of things. Just because the cake didn't work out as I intended doesn't mean the work was wasted. So when we think about making the case or trying to sell the value or things like that, it might not, our first attempt may not have worked in the way that we wanted to, or even our second attempt, or even our third attempt, or things like that. But it doesn't mean that what we did was wasted. If I go back to this one, there was still cake. We still ate cake. The cake actually tasted quite delicious. Looked terrible, but it tasted really good. It wasn't wasted. I learned from it. Point number 2, between cake 1 and cake 2, I learned some really valuable lessons, and I got better. So when I'm selling the value of information in the organization, maybe it doesn't work the way I wanted it to the first time, or things like that, or maybe I didn't get everything that I wanted, but the next time I do it, I'm better informed. I know a little bit more. I change what needs to be changed. I changed from a cream cheese icing to a buttercream icing. I changed from trying to do a great big massive cake into doing a cupcake. I changed from trying to sculpt the things myself to using a chocolate mold, things like that. And at the end, there was still cake. At the end, we have still achieved something. We have still moved the needle. We're still on that journey kind of thing. We've still got stuff that we've either learned something from, or that we can take forward into the future. So while it can definitely feel like an uphill battle at times to get some of this across the line, and to get some of this done, it's not going to waste. Your work is incredibly valuable. It is extremely important. So continue to fight that good fight. Continue to make that case, or cake. See what I did there? Continue to. I haven't even had any coffee today.
It's too early. It's too early.
I know, and I haven't. I think 5 a.m. is when I can finally start drinking coffee for sure. So, so that's our message. That message for you today is, remember, at the end, there is still cake. The work that you have done is valuable. Learn from it, improve, get better. Things like that. We do have some resources here. You can scan these QR codes and download those straight away, but they will be, Teresa will pop some links in there for you as well. We've left you with a couple of minutes at the end to please throw any questions on anything that we've talked about today, or my red velvet cake recipe. Happy to share that too. But yeah, if you do have questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'll try and answer those in the few minutes that we have left.
In hindsight, I'm feeling that we missed an opportunity to not name the webinar the business cake for information management.
The business cake. I know we totally I can't believe we missed that one. So we should have named the next one the ingredients for good AI.
Wow.
See?
Not too late to change.
No, true, definitely.
Alyssa, I nominate your need for caffeine for re-energizing our audience members today. Estimate to what some people have been putting in here of how much they're enjoying this talk today. Yes, the QR codes that are up on the screen, I also have those same links in that URL, that resources link that I've been sharing out there. So multiple ways to get a hold of this really cool content that Alyssa and Bruce have been sharing. PDF of this slide deck is also linked in the resources URL that I've been sharing. I also dropped a link in there, as Alyssa reminded me. We have another webinar with them coming up next month, October 25th. And so I put the link to that webinar's registration page in the chat. So you get to hear some more really good stuff from these folks. And do please, if you have more questions, please keep popping them in the chat. Gabrielle very kindly pulled up that McKinsey report that someone was asking for. Thank you.
I'm just popping that in. I'm popping that in to send to everybody now. Thank you so much, Gabrielle, who always has my back no matter what. I appreciate that.
So I get to talk
and I think
every day.
Yeah. And I think there was a question about some of the other ones, some of the other references as well. They should all be in the slide deck. But if there's any issues with that, please do get in contact with me, and I can certainly provide those as well.
I think it was the too much stored data can be expensive slide.
They should be in the slide deck, or are easily referenced by looking at the the name of the organization. That you should be able to track back through there. But they should be all in there, definitely. So, here's a good question. If we had to choose one information management activity to tackle head on, and only one, which one would it be? Oh, gosh, that is such an excellent question. What would it be? What it would be for me is the simplification of retention and disposal schedules, because I think that has the most impact, and it has the most significant amount of flow on for so many different things. So, for example, if we can simplify our retention and disposal schedule, we can then also simplify a taxonomy. We have less rules to manage. They're easier to implement. There's less impact then on the users. There's less impact on how we actually apply those rules to content sources and things like that. So I think if we can only pick one, which is challenging enough for me as it is, that's a great question. That's really made me think. I think it has to be the simplification of retention and disposal schedules for me.
So would that also be like setting an industry standard across the globe? So if you work in a particular industry, then one retention and disposal schedule for that industry across globally?
I think that, I think that would be that would be a dream, but it would be completely impossible. So I worked in a state government early in my career that tried to implement a single system across the entire state government. And I cannot even tell you the ridiculous questions. The ridiculous arguments that the different government entities had, agreeing just simple stuff like what codes should we give each government department, so that we can share information and things like that. So I think that in theory, that is something that would be really good. But in practice, I don't think it works. We do have some other questions. We did have some other questions, but we're needing to, I guess we're really coming to the end of our time here, so we won't get to all of those. That is something though that I can certainly I'll take notes of some of those questions, and try and get some information out on LinkedIn or in some follow-up emails, or we can definitely address them in the next webinar that we have coming up as well. So a great opportunity to join us for that next one coming up. But I'm going to hand it back to Teresa, only to say, look, thank you so much for joining us. It's just an absolute privilege to talk to you about all of this stuff. I could talk about this for days, obviously, but for you to want to join in on that is just so lovely, and we really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. Thanks to Alyssa Blackburn and Bruce Berends of AvePoint. I've had a fantastic time just listening to what all you've had to share, and I love those Slido polls. Thank you. And thanks to AvePoint for underwriting this webinar today. Without the support of our solution providers, AIM wouldn't be able to bring you these free educational programs. So I greatly appreciate AvePoint's support of AIM's webinar program. As you see, have up on the screen right now, AIM 24, we are in maybe a little more than a few months out, and it's in the first week of April of 2024 in San Antonio, Texas. But the website is up, registration is open. We are working to secure keynote speakers and to get a full agenda up. So you're going to know within the next month just even more of what all we have planned going on. So please put that in your budgets for 2024. Really want to see you come out and join folks like Alyssa and Bruce and how many other solution providers, and more importantly, hundreds of your industry peers are going to be there for you to network with each other and so that you can talk with folks like Alyssa and Bruce and even hopefully chat directly with them and to ask your questions and just to learn. I love AIM conferences, and they're just a fantastic way just to continue your information management learning opportunities. So that does bring things to a wrap. Just thank everybody for your time today. For AIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we will see you with our next webinar. Have a great day.
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much.